people view the U.S. as being party to this war because, Israeli officials say that without a U.S. support, they couldn't launch this war. You turn off the tap and the weapons dry out. So there's been anger in our part of the world, not at just what's happening, but at the world's reaction. When we see these violations, human rights violations and international law violations, and we're watching the world letting it happen. When October 7th happened, the world rightfully condemned it and took strong action and strong positions. We are outraged that this same is not happening when Palestinians are getting killed. And so there is the sense of the selective application of humanitarian law and a sense of unfairness, a sense of our lives don't matter as much.
You said people back home see the United States as complicit in what's happening?
They see it as an enabler, So clearly the U.S. is the country that has most leverage over the U.S., over Israel. And like I said, it is the biggest ally and biggest supporter. And the Arab world is getting, the rest of the world actually is getting mixed messages. So on the one hand, the U.S. is demanding that more aid rightfully go back into Gaza. At the same time, they're denying that the starvation is intentional. On the one hand, they are outraged by the attacks on the aid convoys, but at the same time, they're denying that Israel is violating international humanitarian law. There's an expression of concern over civilian deaths, but at the same time, there's a provision of offensive weapons to Israel that are used against Palestinians. When you try so hard to thread the needle, you can risk dropping the ball. You can risk letting your values and principles unravel. And that has a deep impact. Either everyone is accountable or no one is. So the next time a country breaks the rules, and the U.S. comes and tries to apply more authority, those countries are going to say, well, you made an exception here, so why apply it to us? I think Gaza now is like a microcosm of our New World disorder, of the breakdown of international norms, of the return of might is right. And I think that's very dangerous, not just for our region, but for the entire world.
Recently, President Biden, just about a month ago, warned Prime Minister Netanyahu that U.S. policy would change if Israel's behavior and conduct in this war didn't change. Do you believe the U.S. is starting to use the leverage you say it has?
Well, look, there's definitely been a change in tone and language. And you're right, the president has been warning and has been trying very hard to persuade Netanyahu, for example, to not enter Rafah. But we've seen time and again Israeli officials not heeding the warnings or counsel or advice of allies. So I think it's time that the international community, including the U.S., really use its political leverage to compel Israel to end the war and to let aid in. And it's by standing up for international law, saying, for example, the building of illegal settlements is wrong and it has to stop. It's by saying that, we are not going to provide you with offensive weapons. It's by saying we're not going to continue to use our veto to not hold Israel accountable when it breaks the law. Diplomatic pressure is also very, very important. So there are many tools that the U.S. has in order to compel Israel to do the right thing. And I think for the sake of our world, the U.S. may be Israel's most closest ally, but a good friend holds a friend accountable.
You argued people need to understand that Palestinian mothers love their children just as much as Israeli mothers. Why do you feel like that needed to be said?
Well, because, for decades, the dehumanization of Palestinians has been an intentional approach that Israel adopted in order to numb people to Palestinian suffering. It's actually quite surprising to see just how deep the undercurrents of dehumanizations run. Arabs are generally accused of teaching hate, and Palestinians as well. But Israelis have actually walled Palestinians out of sight and out of mind. It's kind of reduced them to nameless, faceless security threats that you have to defend yourself against.
To see Hamas as representing Palestinian people, you're saying, is wrong.
Absolutely wrong. And also just to point out that most of the people alive in Gaza today were not alive when Hamas was elected. They were either they were not born or they were children at the time. So absolutely Hamas does not represent the majority of Palestinians. And if Palestinians hate Israelis, it is not because of their religion or their identity. It's because of the fact that they've only interacted with them as enforcers of a military state. They have only known them through their checkpoints and bullets and guns. It's not something that's inherently in them against Jewish people. In fact, I always try to remind people that, we have coexisted, Christians, Muslims, and Jewish people for the longest time.
Well, historians will argue anti-Semitism